The sun cast long shadows across the stone walls of Westovia Castle as Prince Alaric paced his private chambers. Outside, the kingdom buzzed with life. Merchants selling their wares, children playing in the streets, farmers bringing crops to market. But inside these walls, Alaric felt more alone than ever. He stopped at the large window overlooking the royal gardens where his youngest wife, Marielle, was picking flowers. Her simple joy at something so small always warmed his heart. Further, in the distance, his second wife, Daria, was instructing servants about preparations for the upcoming harvest festival, her commanding presence evident even from afar. And somewhere in the castle, his first wife, Eleonora, was likely reviewing the royal accounts or meeting with nobles, always focused on politics and power. 3 wives, 3 different women, 3 separate lives intertwined with his. It was the way of royal marriages in these lands, alliances formed through wedding vows, peace maintained through shared beds and crowns. "Your Highness, you seem troubled," said a voice behind him. Alaric turned to see Thomas, his advisor since childhood, and the only person in the kingdom who spoke to him plainly, without the weight of formality or fear. "I am," Alaric admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. "I've been thinking about something that might seem strange." Thomas closed the heavy wooden door before approaching. "I've known you since you were stealing apples from the kitchen, my prince. Nothing you say could surprise me now." Alaric smiled briefly before his face grew serious again. "Do they love me, Thomas? Any of them? Or do they love the crown I wear?" Thomas remained silent, his weathered face carefully neutral. "You don't need to answer," Alaric continued. "Your silence says enough." He walked to a small table and poured 2 cups of wine, handing one to his old friend. "I have everything a man could want, and yet I wonder if I have anything at all. Would they mourn me, Thomas? Or would they mourn the power they lost? Such thoughts are natural for a man in your position, Your Highness." "I want to know the truth," Alaric said, his voice growing stronger. "And I think I know how to find it." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "How?" "I need to die." Thomas choked on his wine. "Your Highness." "Not really die," Alaric clarified, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Just appear to." As the day turned to evening, the 2 men talked in hushed voices. Servants who came to light the candles were sent away. Guards at the door were told to allow no one entry, not even the prince's wives. Inside, a plan took shape, a plan that would either break Alaric's heart or heal it. "It could work," Thomas finally said, after hours of discussion. "The royal physician is loyal to you above all others. He would help spread word of your illness. And the royal undertaker is your cousin," Alaric added. "He could prepare an empty casket, sealed for the ceremony." "But who would believe you died so suddenly?" Thomas asked. "You're young, healthy." Alaric walked to the window again. The gardens were empty now, the sky painted with the oranges and purples of sunset. "We'll say it was a rare poison, something from the eastern lands. Slow acting, discovered, too late. We'll say I've been ill for weeks but kept it private to avoid causing panic." Thomas nodded slowly. "And afterward, when you're supposedly buried?" "I'll disguise myself as a servant. No one pays attention to servants, Thomas. I'll work in the castle, observe my wives, learn the truth. And if the truth hurts," Alaric's face hardened, "then I'll still be better for knowing it." Over the next week, the plan unfolded like a carefully written play. Prince Alaric began missing public appearances, with Thomas explaining he was indisposed with important matters. Then came the whispers of illness spreading through the castle like wildfire. The royal physician visited regularly, his face grim when he emerged from the prince's chambers. Alaric watched his wife's reactions to these early stages with keen interest. Eleonora, his first wife, sent servants to inquire about his health, but never came herself. "The northern princess is busy with the trade agreements," Thomas reported. "She asked if you'd still be able to sign the documents by week's end." Daria, his second wife, visited once, standing at the foot of his bed while he pretended to sleep fitfully. She placed a hand on his forehead, clicked her tongue, and left instructions with the physician for better care. She seemed concerned, Alaric told Thomas afterward. But in the way one worries about a prized horse that's gone lame. Marielle, his youngest wife, came every day. She sat beside his bed, reading to him, placing cool cloths on his head and shooing away servants so she could care for him herself. She truly seems worried, Alaric admitted, feeling the first pangs of guilt. We can still stop this, Thomas said. But Alaric shook his head. No. I need to know what happens when they think I'm gone forever, not just ill for a time. On the 7th day, the plan moved to its next phase. The royal physician announced that Prince Alaric's condition had worsened dramatically. By nightfall, the news spread throughout the castle and into the town beyond. The prince was dead. Alaric, hidden in a secret chamber connected to his bedroom, watched through a small opening as the physician pronounced him dead. He saw the royal guard stiffen at the news, watch servants begin to weep, and he saw his wives, summoned to his deathbed too late, receive the terrible news. Eleonora's face remained composed, though her hands tightened into fists at her sides. Arrangements must be made, were her first words. The kingdom cannot know until we have a plan for succession. Daria fell to her knees beside the bed where a meticulously crafted figure lay beneath the sheets, its face covered respectfully with a cloth. My prince, she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. My heart is torn from my chest. Marielle made no sound at all. She simply stood in the doorway, her face draining of color before turning and fleeing down the hallway. The youngest one truly grieves, Thomas whispered, standing beside Alaric in the hidden chamber. Or she's the best actress, Alaric replied, though his voice lacked conviction. We continue as planned. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. The castle was draped in black. Messengers rode to neighboring kingdoms bearing the grave news. The great hall was prepared for the prince's body to lie in state before burial. And through it all, Alaric watched from shadows and behind servants' clothing. He had cut his distinctive golden hair short, darkened it with walnut stain, and grown out his beard. He stooped his normally proud shoulders and changed his walk. Even those who had known him for years looked right through him now, seeing only another nameless servant. On the day before his funeral, Alaric slipped into the great hall where his body lay in a closed casket. The royal undertaker, Thomas's trusted cousin, had created a weighted interior that would feel appropriate when carried. The hall was empty save for 2 guards and a single figure kneeling before the casket. Marielle. Alaric busied himself with cleaning duties, working his way closer. He could hear her whispering to the casket, her words meant only for him. I don't know how to do this without you, she was saying, her voice breaking. I'm not strong like the others. I never wanted a crown or a kingdom. I just wanted you. Alaric nearly revealed himself then. The pain in her voice cut through him like a knife, but he held firm to his plan, slipping away before he could be noticed. That night, the final preparations were made. Thomas helped Alaric settle into his new identity, Hal, a recently hired kitchen servant who would live in the castle barracks. His story was simple: a farmer's son from the outer provinces seeking work after a bad harvest. Are you certain of this? Thomas asked one last time as they stood in the small, bare room that would be Alaric's home for the coming weeks. Once the funeral happens, there's no turning back. Alaric looked around at the servants' quarters, so different from his luxurious royal chambers, and nodded. I'm certain. I need to see who these women truly are when they think no one is watching, when they think the throne is empty and waiting to be claimed. Thomas bowed, a gesture of respect he rarely showed even when others were watching. Then may the truth bring you peace, my prince, whatever it may be. As Thomas left, Alaric sat on the hard, narrow bed and stared at the stone wall. Tomorrow, Prince Alaric would be buried with all the ceremony the kingdom could muster. And Hal, the servant, would begin his watch, learning which of his wives had truly loved the man and which had only loved the crown. The truth waited to be discovered, and it would shock them all. The funeral procession wound through the streets of the capital like a black river. Thousands of citizens lined the route, many weeping openly for their beloved prince. Flowers rained down on the ornate casket as it passed, carried by 6 royal guards in ceremonial armor. Behind it walked the 3 widowed princesses, each dressed in traditional mourning clothes but wearing their grief in starkly different ways. Eleonora, the first wife, walked with her head held high, her face a perfect mask of dignified sorrow. Not a tear stained her cheeks, though she accepted condolences from nobles with graceful nods. Daria sobbed dramatically, requiring the support of her handmaidens to stay upright, her cries echoing off the stone buildings. Marielle walked alone, her eyes downcast, her steps mechanical, as if her body moved without her mind's involvement. From his place among the kitchen servants who had been ordered to line the final stretch of the procession, Alaric watched it all. His plain brown clothes and darkened hair rendered him invisible to those who had once bowed in his presence. No one spared a glance for Hal the kitchen boy as he blended in with dozens of other servants paying respects to their departed prince. "Quite a show, isn't it?" whispered a serving girl beside him as the royal widows passed. "Look at the second," one wailing like that. "My mother says she's making sure everyone sees how sad she is." "And the first one?" Alaric asked quietly, curious about how the common folk viewed his wives. The girl snorted softly. "Cold as winter in the north where she came from. But the little one—" Her voice softened. "She's truly heartbroken, poor thing." Alaric's eyes followed Marielle's small figure. Even from a distance, he could see the emptiness in her eyes, so different from her usual warmth. For the first time since beginning this deception, real doubt crept into his mind. Was this worth the pain it caused? The funeral itself was a grand affair in the royal temple. Alaric, posing as Hal, couldn't attend. Kitchen servants weren't permitted in such sacred ceremonies. But Thomas found him afterward, slipping into the kitchen storeroom where Alaric was inventorying wine barrels as part of his new duties. "It's done," Thomas said quietly after ensuring they were alone. "The empty casket rests in the royal crypt beside your father." Alaric nodded, feeling strangely hollow. "And my wives." Eleonora maintained her composure throughout. Daria wept, until she nearly fainted. "Marielle," Thomas hesitated. "Tell me." She placed a single white flower on the casket and whispered something no one could hear. Then she stood silent as stone until the ceremony ended. Alaric leaned against the cool stone wall. Now we wait, now we watch. Over the next days, Alaric settled into his role as Hal. He rose before dawn with the other kitchen servants, worked long hours carrying supplies, scrubbing pots and running errands throughout the castle. His soft hands grew calloused, his shoulders ached, and he gained a new appreciation for the people who had always worked invisibly around him. He also gained something unexpected: friends. The kitchen staff welcomed the quiet, hard-working newcomer into their circle. They shared their meals with him, taught him shortcuts for his tasks, and included him in their conversations and jokes. For the first time in his life, people spoke to him without the barrier of rank. They saw him, not his crown, not his power, just him. "You're getting too comfortable in this role," Thomas warned during one of their secret meetings in the wine cellar. "Remember why you're here." "I haven't forgotten," Alaric replied. "What news of my wives?" And there was plenty of news. The entire castle buzzed with gossip about the 3 widows and their very different approaches to mourning. Eleonora wasted no time. On the 3rd day after the funeral, she called a meeting of the royal council. Though Alaric couldn't attend, his kitchen duties took him past the council chamber doors where guards stood at attention. "Remarkable recovery," one guard muttered to the other as Alaric passed with a tray of refreshments for the council members. "The northern princess hasn't shed a tear since they put him in the ground. Now she's in there talking about trade agreements like nothing happened." Later that day, Alaric managed to position himself in the Great Hall during the public audience hour, a time when citizens could bring concerns before the royal family. Traditionally, he would have presided over this. Now, Eleonora sat in his throne. "The kingdom requires stability during this difficult transition," she announced to the gathered crowd. Until matters of succession are formally settled, I will handle matters of state as senior wife of our beloved departed prince. Alaric noticed how she emphasized senior wife, a subtle reminder that she had been the first political alliance, the first marriage contract. He also noticed the ornate circlet she wore, not his crown but a step closer than the simple tiara she had worn as his wife. That evening, Alaric's kitchen duties took him to Eleanora's chambers with her dinner tray. Her lady's maid took it, at the door, but through the opening he caught a glimpse of his first wife. She was not dressed in mourning black but in a deep purple gown, the color of royalty. She stood by the window dictating a letter to her secretary. "Inform my father that discussions of a new alliance should be put on hold for now," she was saying. "The situation here is developing favorably." The door closed before Alaric could hear more, but what he'd witnessed was enough. A cold feeling settled in his stomach as he returned to the kitchen. The next day brought revelations about his second wife. Daria had taken to her bed after the funeral, reportedly overcome with grief. Servants were sent away, with only her personal handmaiden from the eastern lands permitted to attend her. "Poor thing hasn't eaten in days," the cook clucked sympathetically as she prepared a light broth. "Hal, take this up to Princess Daria's chambers. Perhaps she'll take a few sips." This was the opportunity Alaric had been waiting for. He took the silver tray and made his way through the familiar corridors to Daria's suite in the eastern wing of the castle. When he reached her door, he knocked softly. "Leave it outside," called a voice in heavily accented Westovian. Instead of following the instruction, Alaric pushed the door open slightly. "The cook asked me to make sure you take some broth, Your Highness," he said, keeping his eyes downcast as a servant would. The room was dimly lit, heavy curtains drawn against the daylight. Daria's handmaiden rushed forward to take the tray, but not before Alaric caught sight of the supposedly bedridden princess. She sat at her writing desk, fully dressed, her face animated as she spoke rapidly in her native tongue, to a man Alaric recognized with shock, her brother's ambassador. Daria looked up sharply at the intrusion, her reddened eyes the only sign of her supposed days of weeping. "What are you doing? Get out!" her handmaiden hissed, pushing Alaric backward. He bowed apologetically. "Forgive me. I was told to ensure Her Highness takes nourishment." Daria waved a dismissive hand. "Tell your cook I am grateful. Now go." As the door closed, Alaric lingered just long enough to hear the conversation resume in rapid Eastern tongue. Though he couldn't understand the words, the tone was clear. This was no grief-stricken widow but a woman making plans. That night, he reported what he'd seen to Thomas. "It gets worse," Thomas said grimly. "The Eastern ambassador has been seen, meeting with military commanders, and Daria has been sending letters east daily. My sources say she's calling for her brother's personal guard to ensure her safety during this unstable time. She's positioning for a power grab," Alaric concluded, "and Eleanora is already acting as if she rules." "What did you expect?" Thomas asked. "They were political marriages. The alliances were always about power." Alaric nodded slowly. "And Marielle? What of my third wife?" For the first time, Thomas's stern expression softened. "She alone truly mourns you. She has refused all visitors and spends her days in the gardens you both loved. The garden staff say she tends your favorite flowers herself and speaks to them as if they were you." The following morning, Alaric arranged to switch duties with another servant assigned to the gardens. As he trimmed hedges and raked fallen leaves, he watched from a distance as Marielle moved slowly among the late-blooming roses. She wore simple black, her usual jewels and fine accessories absent. When a court lady approached her with some question, Marielle's answers were brief, her attention clearly elsewhere. After the lady departed, Marielle knelt beside a patch of blue flowers, the mountain gentians Alaric had imported from her homeland when she first arrived, homesick and afraid in a strange castle. "The blue is still your favorite, isn't it?" he heard her say softly to the flowers. "You said they reminded you of my eyes the first time we met." Alaric's hands stilled on his rake. She was talking to him, he realized. Not performatively, as Daria had wailed at his funeral, but privately, intimately believing herself alone. The royal treasurer came again today, she continued, gently touching one delicate blue petal. He wanted to discuss my allowance now that you're gone. I only asked for enough to start that children's home we talked about. The one for orphans of the border wars. Her voice broke slightly. I thought you would like that. Something good coming from all this pain. Alaric had to turn away, busying himself with fallen leaves to hide the emotion on his face from passing gardeners. He and Marielle had indeed discussed such a project late one night as they lay in bed. He'd mentioned it only once, yet she remembered. As days turned into weeks, the patterns among his 3 wives became increasingly clear. Eleonora moved boldly, wearing royal colors instead of mourning black, holding court in the throne room, and meeting with ambassadors to maintain the kingdom's important alliances. Servants whispered that she had already ordered the royal bedchamber, Alaric's own room, to be cleared of his belongings. Daria played a different game. In public, she remained the grieving widow, dressed in deepest black, her eyes perpetually reddened from tears. But Alaric, now watching carefully, noticed how those tears appeared only when others were present to witness them. Behind closed doors, she met regularly with her brother's men, and rumors spread that Eastern troops were gathering at the border as a precaution. And Marielle simply grieved. She took no part in court politics, made no moves for power. She established the orphanage in Alaric's name with minimal ceremony, visited it regularly, and continued her one-sided conversations with him in the garden. Once Alaric passed her in a corridor while carrying linens, and she looked through him as if he weren't there, her gaze focused on something distant and lost. By the end of the first month of his death, Alaric had seen enough of his first 2 wives. The truth he had sought was painfully clear, but as he met Thomas in their secret location that night, his mind was filled with thoughts of only one. I've made a terrible mistake, he said, his voice hollow. Thomas stared at Alaric across the small table in the hidden chamber beneath the wine cellar. Candlelight cast long shadows on the stone walls, making the former prince's face look gaunt and tired. 5 weeks had passed since Alaric's funeral, and the strain of living as a servant while watching his kingdom begin to fracture was taking its toll. A mistake? Thomas asked, pouring them both cups of wine. Because of what you've learned about your wives? Because of what I've done to Marielle? Alaric said, taking a long drink. The others, you were right. They never loved me. But she did. She does. And I'm letting her suffer. Thomas sighed heavily. Your Highness, revealing yourself now would create chaos. Eleonora has already sent messengers to her father's kingdom. Daria's brother has moved troops to our eastern border. The council is divided on who should rule in your absence. All the more reason to return, Alaric argued. I can stop this before it turns into open conflict. And how would you explain your deception? Who would trust a king who faked his own death to test his wife's loyalty? Alaric had no answer for that. He stared into his wine cup, seeing the impossible situation he had created. If he revealed himself now, he would likely lose the respect of his council, his allies, and his people. If he remained dead, his kingdom would likely be torn apart by the ambitions of Eleonora's father and Daria's brother. I need more time, he finally said. Let me watch a little longer. Perhaps an opportunity will present itself. As Alaric returned to his servants' quarters that night, he passed through the main courtyard. The moon was full, bathing the stone walls in silver light. A small figure sat alone by the central fountain, and Alaric's heart clenched when he recognized Marielle. Without thinking, he changed course, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. She didn't look up as he drew near, her eyes fixed on the water. Pardon me, Your Highness, he said softly, bowing as a servant would. Is there something you need? It's very late to be out alone. Marielle looked up, seeming to notice him for the first time. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale in the moonlight. Oh, you're one of the kitchen staff, aren't you? Yes, Your Highness, Hal. He kept his head slightly bowed, though it pained him not to look directly at her. "You don't need to worry about me, Hal. I just couldn't sleep. The rooms are too empty now." Alaric's throat tightened. He wanted desperately to reveal himself, to end her pain with a few simple words. Instead, he said, "Would you like me to bring you some warm milk or tea? It might help with sleep." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "That's kind, but no. Sometimes it's better to just feel the sadness than try to chase it away." She looked back at the fountain. "Did you know the prince? Before he died, I mean." The question caught him off guard. I only started working here recently, Your Highness. But everyone speaks very highly of him." "Do they?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "What do they say?" Alaric hesitated, then decided to answer honestly. "The kitchen staff say he was fair, that he would sometimes come down to thank them personally after big feasts. The gardeners say he knew all the names of the plants and would ask about their families." Marielle nodded slowly. "That sounds like him. He noticed people that others overlooked." She stood up suddenly. "Thank you, Hal. I think I will try to sleep now." Alaric bowed deeply as she passed. When he straightened, he was surprised to find her stopped a few paces away, looking back at him with a strange expression. "You have kind eyes," she said, "like his." Then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the castle. Alaric stood, frozen, his heart pounding. Had she recognized something in him? Or was it just a grieving widow seeing traces of her lost husband in a stranger's face? The next day brought new tensions to the castle. Alaric, assigned to serve at the council meeting, watched as Eleonora and Daria faced off across the large oak table. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the two widows argued over trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms. "The Northern Alliance has always been Westovia's strongest," Eleonora said, her voice cold and precise. "My father's kingdom provides the grain that feeds our people through winter. This new agreement simply strengthens those bonds. Bonds that give your father's merchants special access to our ports while taxing Eastern goods at double the rate," Daria countered, her eyes flashing. "How convenient for your family, first wife." "We are all family here," Eleonora replied with a tight smile. "Or have you forgotten our shared grief so quickly, second wife?" The council chamber fell silent at the thinly veiled accusation. Everyone knew that Daria had ceased her public displays of mourning weeks ago. "Where is third wife?" asked Lord Bentley, the eldest council member. "Princess Marielle should be present for these discussions." "She declined to attend," Eleonora said dismissively. "Again, she prefers her gardens to matters of state." "Perhaps she prefers honest grief to political maneuvering," Daria shot back, surprising everyone. It was the first time she had aligned herself with Marielle against Eleonora. As the meeting devolved further into thinly veiled accusations, Alaric moved quietly around the edges of the room, refilling water glasses and observing. The kingdom was already dividing into factions, he realized. Northern supporters behind Eleonora, Eastern allies behind Daria, and Marielle, the only one with true claim to his heart, had no powerful family to back her, no army to call upon. That evening, as Alaric carried linens through the royal wing, he overheard voices from Eleonora's chambers. The door was slightly ajar and he slowed his steps. "The council grows impatient," came a man's voice. "Lord Harwick, Eleonora's most loyal supporter on the council. We need to move forward with the coronation plans." "It's too soon," Eleonora replied. "Tradition demands a full 3 months of mourning before a successor is named." "Tradition won't stop the Eastern troops at our border," Harwick argued. "Every day we wait gives Daria more time to position her brother as a protector of the realm." "And what of the young one, Marielle?" "Ugh," dismissive laugh. "She has no claim without a child. Her family's kingdom is small, with no significant military. She's no threat." There was a pause. Then Eleonora said, "Have the royal jeweler brought to me tomorrow. It's time the crown was adjusted to its new wearer." Alaric nearly dropped the linens he carried. They were already planning a coronation, Eleonora's coronation. His crown, passed down through generations of his family, was to be resized for her head. He hurried away before he could be discovered, his mind racing. This had gone too far. He needed to act, but how? Revealing himself now would be seen as a mad trick by many. Who would believe a dead king returned? As he rounded a corner, deep in thought, he collided with someone. Linens went flying as he stumbled backward, apologies already on his lips. Then he froze. Marielle stood before him, equally startled by the collision. "I'm so sorry, Your Highness," he said quickly, dropping to his knees to gather the scattered sheets. "I wasn't watching where I was going." To his surprise, she knelt, as well helping him collect the linens. "It was my fault too," she said. "I was distracted." Their hands brushed as they reached for the same pillowcase, and Alaric felt a jolt of electricity at the contact. He looked up reflexively, forgetting for a moment his role as a servant, and their eyes met. Marielle's breath caught audibly. She stared at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "Have we met before? Before you started working here, I mean?" Panic flashed through Alaric. He quickly looked down again. "I don't think so, Your Highness. I'm from a small village far from the capital." "Of course," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. She handed him the last of the linens and stood. "What's your name again?" "Hal, Your Highness." "Hal," she repeated slowly. "Well, Hal, would you like to earn some extra coins? I need someone to help me in the gardens tomorrow, someone strong enough to move some stone benches." "I would be honored, Your Highness," Alaric replied, bowing to hide the emotion on his face. "What time shall I come?" "After the midday meal. Meet me by the blue gentians." With that, she continued down the hallway, though Alaric noticed she glanced back at him once before turning the corner. That night he met again with Thomas, sharing what he had overheard about Eleonora's coronation plans. "This changes everything," Thomas said gravely. "If she takes the crown formally, challenging her later becomes an act of treason." "I need to reveal myself," Alaric insisted, "before it's too late." "And be labeled a madman? Or worse, an imposter?" Thomas shook his head. "We need proof first. Proof of their true intentions that all can see." "What kind of proof?" "It is no prank," Thomas said, stepping forward from his position near the door. "This is indeed Prince Alaric of Westovia, alive and well." Chaos erupted in the council chamber. Guards drew swords, uncertain where to point them. Council members jumped to their feet, shouting questions or accusations. Through it all, Alaric watched the three women who had been his wives. Eleonora's face had gone chalk white, her composure shattered for the first time since he'd known her. Daria looked as if she might faint, her eyes darting between Alaric and the exits as if calculating escape routes. Only Marielle remained calm. Their eyes met across the room and the smallest smile touched her lips. Not surprise, confirmation. Alaric raised his hands and gradually the room quieted. "Yes, I live," he said, his voice carrying to every corner. "I faked my death to learn the truth about those closest to me, about who could be trusted to care for my kingdom and my people if I were truly gone." He turned to the council members, many of whom still looked disbelieving. "Lord Thomas has proof of my identity, documents, the royal seal, knowledge that only the true prince could possess. Examine them at your leisure. But first know this. I have watched for weeks as two of my wives revealed their true ambitions in what they thought was my absence." Alaric walked slowly toward Eleonora, who seemed to shrink from his approach. "You, first wife, wasted no time, assuming my authority. You wore royal colors while my body was barely cold. You planned a coronation and ordered my crown resized for your head." He turned to Daria, who had recovered enough to glare defiantly back at him. "And you, second wife, played the grieving widow while plotting with your brother to place your family soldiers on my soil. Your tears were as false as your vows of love." Finally, he moved to stand before Marielle. "Only you mourned sincerely. Only you remembered the man, not just the crown. Only you kept faith. He extended his hand to her, and after a moment's hesitation, she placed hers in it. A collective gasp went through the room as Alaric brought her hand to his lips in a gesture of respect no servant would dare. The kingdom has seen enough deception, he announced, turning back to face the stunned council. Tomorrow I will address my people and explain my actions. Tonight I reclaim my throne and my authority. His voice hardened. And I will deal with those who have revealed themselves as enemies of Westovia's peace. Guards loyal to Thomas stepped forward, surrounding Eleonora and Daria. The two women, still speechless with shock, offered no resistance. As the council chamber slowly emptied, messengers racing to spread the incredible news throughout the castle and beyond, Alaric found himself alone with Marielle. The last of the guards had escorted the other wives to secure quarters, and Thomas was busy gathering the proof that would confirm Alaric's identity to any doubters. "How long have you known?" he asked softly. Marielle reached up, gently touching his darkened beard. "I began to suspect weeks ago. Little things, the way you held yourself when you thought no one was watching, the way your voice sometimes slipped into familiar patterns." Her fingers traced the outline of his jaw. "But I wasn't certain until yesterday in the garden. Your eyes, they've always given you away, at least to me. Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "I needed to understand why," she said simply. "Why you would put me through such pain." Guilt washed over him. "I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "I know," she interrupted. "I understand now. You needed the truth. We all did." She stepped back slightly, looking up at him with clear eyes. "No more deceptions between us?" "No more," he promised. "From now on, only truth." As the evening bell began to toll, Alaric realized they had missed their planned meeting by the oak tree. Instead, they stood in the center of power, their future suddenly wide open before them. Outside the windows, the sun set on his last day as Hal the servant. Tomorrow, Prince Alaric would return to his people. But tonight belonged to the woman who had recognized him through all disguises, the one who had loved not the crown, but the man beneath it. Dawn broke over Westovia with a brilliant display of pinks and golds, as if the sun itself celebrated Prince Alaric's return. Throughout the night, messengers had raced across the kingdom carrying the extraordinary news. The prince lived. By morning, the castle courtyard overflowed with people, nobles, merchants, farmers, and laborers, all desperate to see the miracle with their own eyes. Alaric stood before a mirror in his royal chambers, Thomas and two trusted servants helping him prepare. Gone were the rough servant's clothes, the darkened hair, and the stooped posture. He wore the formal attire of Westovia's ruler, deep blue velvet embroidered with silver, the colors of his family line. His beard had been trimmed and his hair restored to its natural golden color. "The people are restless, Your Highness," Thomas reported. "Some believe the rumors, others think it's a trick. They need to see you." "And my wives?" Alaric asked, adjusting the silver circlet on his head. "Not the full crown yet, as tradition required a formal coronation ceremony. That would come later. Princess Eleonora refuses to speak to anyone. Her northern advisors are demanding safe passage back to her father's kingdom." Thomas's voice hardened. Princess Daria attempted to send messages to her brother's troops during the night. The messengers were intercepted. Alaric nodded, unsurprised. "And Marielle?" For the first time that morning, Thomas smiled. "She is already in the Great Hall, helping to calm the nobles and explain what she knows." Many seemed to trust her account, given her evident lack of political ambition. Alaric felt a surge of pride. In the chaos of his return, Marielle had stepped forward not to seize power, but to help maintain order. Even now, she was thinking of the kingdom's stability. A knock at the door interrupted them. A guard entered and bowed deeply. "Your Highness, the council is assembled, and there's news from the borders. The eastern troops have halted their advance. Their commanders request clarification regarding whether you are truly alive. Tell them they will have their answer within the hour," Alaric replied. He turned back to the mirror, studying his reflection. The man who looked back at him was neither the carefree prince he had been, nor the humble servant he had pretended to be. The experience had changed him, hardened him in some ways, softened him in others. "I'm ready," he said finally. The walk to the great hall seemed both longer and shorter than Alaric remembered. Guards and servants dropped to their knees as he passed, their faces showing a mixture of shock, joy, and confusion. He nodded to each, making eye contact, silently promising explanations soon. At the massive oak doors of the great hall, he paused. Inside, the council waited, along with representatives from every province, guild, and significant family in Westovia. Thomas gave him an encouraging nod. With a deep breath, Alaric squared his shoulders and stepped forward. The guard swung the doors open. A hush fell over the crowded hall. Hundreds of eyes turned to stare at the man many had mourned as dead. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then, from the front of the room, Marielle stepped forward, dropping into a formal curtsy. "My prince," she said, her clear voice carrying through the silence. "Welcome home." Like a breaking dam, the hall erupted. People surged forward, some falling to their knees, others calling out questions or exclamations of joy. Guards formed a protective ring around Alaric as he made his way through the crowd to the raised platform where his throne stood. He climbed the steps, turned to face his people, and raised his hands for silence. Gradually, the noise subsided. Every face turned upward, waiting. "People of Westovia," Alaric began, his voice strong despite the emotion welling in his chest. "I stand before you alive and well, though many believed me dead these past 2 months. For this deception, I first must ask your forgiveness." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one interrupted. "I did not make this decision lightly," he continued. "As your prince, it is my duty to ensure Westovia's future security and prosperity. To do this, I needed to know the truth, about those closest to me, about the alliances that bind our kingdom, about who could be trusted with Westovia's welfare if I were truly gone." He paused, scanning the faces below. Many nodded in understanding, though confusion remained on others. What I discovered was both heartbreaking and illuminating. 2 of my wives, political marriages made to secure alliances with neighboring kingdoms, revealed themselves as ambitious players focused on power rather than Westovia's well-being. Their families positioned troops at our borders, preparing to claim influence through force if necessary. Angry murmurs spread through the hall. Westovians were proud of their independence from larger neighboring kingdoms. But I also discovered loyalty and love where I had not fully recognized it before, Alaric said, his voice softening as his eyes found Marielle in the crowd. "I learned which council members truly serve Westovia and which serve themselves. And perhaps most importantly, I came to know my own people in a way I never could have from the throne." He stepped forward to the edge of the platform. "As Hal the servant, I worked alongside the castle staff. I carried water, scrubbed floors, and shared meals with those who maintain this castle day after day without recognition. I heard your conversations, your concerns, your hopes for the future. I saw Westovia through new eyes, your eyes." The crowd had grown completely silent now, hanging on his every word. "Today marks a new beginning," Alaric declared. "The Eastern troops will withdraw. Their princess will be returning home with a clear message for her brother." His voice took on a steely edge. "Westovia will not be claimed or controlled by outside forces. We are small but strong, and we stand together." Cheers erupted, echoing off the stone walls. Alaric waited for them to subside before continuing. "As for the Northern Alliance, negotiations will begin anew, based on mutual respect rather than the ambitions of individuals." He didn't need to mention Eleonora by name, everyone understood. "Trade will continue, but on terms fair to both kingdoms." Alaric descended the steps from the platform, moving to stand directly among his people, the guards forming a loose circle around him. "There will be many questions in the days to come. You deserve answers, and you shall have them. For now, know this. I am changed by this experience. I have walked among you, worked beside you, listened to your concerns when you didn't know your prince could hear. That knowledge will guide every decision I make from this day forward." For the next hour, Alaric moved through the hall, speaking personally with representatives from every province and guild. He answered questions honestly, explained his deception without excusing it, and outlined his plans for strengthening the kingdom from within rather than through potentially dangerous foreign alliances. By midday, the formal audience had ended, though the castle remained abuzz with activity. Messengers departed for every corner of the kingdom, carrying official announcements of the prince's return. The eastern troops began their withdrawal under the watchful eyes of Westovian scouts. Northern diplomats requested formal meetings to discuss the future of their alliance. As the sun reached its peak, Alaric found a moment of quiet in the small council chamber adjacent to the Great Hall. Thomas entered, carrying sealed documents, the divorce declarations, his advisor explained, placing the parchments on the table. "Once signed, Eleonora and Daria will no longer be your wives under Westovian law. They will retain their birth titles but lose all claims to Westovia's throne." Alaric nodded, taking up a quill. As he signed each document, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The political marriages that had seemed so necessary now felt like shackles he was finally removing. "What of their futures?" he asked as he pressed his seal into the hot wax on the second document. "Eleonora will return to her father's court, though with diminished standing. Her scheming has cost the Northern Kingdom a valuable alliance." Thomas gathered the signed documents. "Daria's situation is more precarious. Her brother is furious that his military posturing has been exposed. She has requested asylum in the Western Mountains rather than return home to face his anger." "Grant it," Alaric said without hesitation. "Under guard, of course, and far from the capital. Despite everything, I don't wish harm to come to her." The door opened, and Marielle entered, pausing when she saw the documents on the table. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," Alaric said, rising to his feet. "We were just finishing." Thomas bowed to them both and withdrew, taking the divorce declarations with him. When the door closed, Alaric and Marielle stood in silence for a moment, the events of the past day, of the past 2 months, hanging between them. "The people have accepted you back more easily than I expected," Marielle finally said. "They're relieved," Alaric replied. "War was coming to our borders. Now it isn't." Marielle moved to the window, looking out over the courtyard where life was, returning to normal. "And what of us? What happens now?" Alaric joined her at the window. "That depends on you." She turned to face him, her expression questioning. "I've dissolved my marriages to Eleonora and Daria," he explained. "Political alliances that became political liabilities. But you—" He took her hands in his. "You were never part of a political arrangement. Your family's kingdom is small with little strategic importance. I married you because I was pretty and agreeable," she finished for him, a hint of old insecurity in her voice. "Because even then something in me recognized something in you." He corrected gently. "I didn't understand it at the time. Perhaps I was too accustomed to seeing marriage as a political tool. But these past weeks have shown me what should have been clear from the beginning." "And what is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That a kingdom built on genuine trust and love is stronger than any alliance sealed with convenient vows." He released one of her hands to touch her cheek. "You are the only wife I wish to keep, Marielle. The only queen Westovia needs. Not because of your family connections or strategic value, but because you loved the man, not the crown." Tears filled her eyes. "And if I had failed your test? If grief had driven me to poor decisions as it did the others? Then I would have been alone but wiser," he admitted. "I took a risk with all our hearts, including my own. I'm just grateful that what I hoped to be true was." Marielle wiped away a tear. "No more tests? No more tests," he promised. "From now on we build on truth." He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "That is, if you still want—" She cut him off by rising on her toes to press her lips to his. When she pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "My answer is yes. It has always been yes. Outside the window, the sun shone brightly over Westovia. The kingdom would face challenges in the coming months, repairing diplomatic relations, addressing the concerns Alaric had heard while living as a servant, rebuilding trust among the council. But for the first time since inheriting the throne, Alaric felt truly confident in the future. He had tested his 3 wives and discovered one true heart. He had tested himself and found both weakness and strength. And in the end, he had found something he hadn't even known he was seeking. A partner who would stand beside him not for power or position, but for love of the man himself. Prince Alaric took Marielle's hand, leading her toward the door and the waiting kingdom beyond. The test was over. Now the real story could begin.